Thank you for joining us at this webinar, jointly organized by CDOTrends and Equinix. My name is Winston Thomas, the editor-in-chief for CDOTrends, and for the next 1 hour or so, your host and moderator. Today, we'll be looking to end this year on an upbeat note, and that's unlocking the Asian digital growth potential. In this webinar, we will look at it from a service provider lens and find out where the challenges lie, why companies like Equinix are expanding across ASEAN, and how leading service providers are converting demands into opportunities while balancing out revenue pressures. Admittedly, this discussion will look at a broad range of issues and topics. So we've invited a varied group of panelists to share their insights. We are fortunate to have Cyrus Adagra, Vice President, Corporate Development and Strategy for Asia Pacific at Equinix. Sanyasi Rao Upatyayula, also called USR for this discussion. He's the Chief Technology Officer for Telecom Engineering Solutions at Tech Mahindra. We have Andrew Bennett, Head of Solution Architecture for PT Business. And lastly, we have Nitin Acharaga, Vice President at analyst firm twimbit. Before we jump into the panel discussion per se, I would like to invite Cyrus to set the stage. He will give us a short presentation on some interesting and exciting developments going on at Equinix in terms of expansion plans. So Cyrus, the virtual floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Winston. Hello, everyone. As Winston mentioned, my name is Cyrus Adagra. I lead the corporate development and strategy team at Equinix for the Asia Pacific region. Today, I'm going to talk you through a few things about the Equinix platform, both globally as well as in region. But before I begin, I just want to set the stage for the discussion. As a lot of you would be well aware, we have been going through an enormous period of change over the last 20 to 30 years, and a number of catalysts have been driving the demand for digitization. It started in the 2000s with the creation of the web and social media. In the 2010s, we saw the rise of cloud, which led to a multi-decade transformation of enterprise IT. More recently, during the pandemic, digital was the only way for the world to continue to revolve, essentially, and maintain some sense of normalcy. And then this year, as I'm sure all of you have heard, almost anything anyone can talk about is AI related, and how that is going to transform both our society as well as business. And so to ride the wave of digital evolution, at Equinix, we believe you needed more distributed digital infrastructure to put workloads at the edge where data is produced, consumed, and analyzed. And so you can see on this page, our platform globally is now across 6 continents, 32 countries, 70 metros, with over 250 data centers. I'm really proud to say that we operate at 6 nines of reliability across our data center platform. We have 460,000 interconnections, 13,000 employees, and over 10,000 customers who use the Equinix platform on a daily basis. I'm also really proud of the fact that we essentially have and are the first data center company to have science-based targets in relation to renewable energy, and where we have made a net zero commitment by 2030. If we move on to the next page, you'll see that over our 25 years of history, we have grown exponentially. We started in the year 1998, and this year represents our 25th year of operations. We're now at $8.2 billion of revenue, over 450,000 interconnections, and you can see that our history is marked with a series of acquisitions that we have done in the Asia Pacific region, in Europe, and in the Americas. Most recently in APAC, we bought a business in India called GPX, and that's been the cornerstone of our Indian expansion over the last few years. If we move on to the final slide, I just want to touch on a few of the expansions that we're planning in the Asia Pacific region. So our growth and expansion has been predominantly focused on India, Southeast Asia, and Japan. So as I mentioned just before, we bought a business called GPX about 2 or 3 years ago. It had 2 data centers in Mumbai, and I'm really proud to say that we're building MB3, which will go live in Q4 of next year, as well as MB4, which will actually go live later this month, early next month. We're also expanding in Chennai with our Chennai 1 data center, which will go live in Q2 of next year. And we're looking at further expansions in the Indian market. In Southeast Asia, we announced our entry into Malaysia late last year, where we're in the process of building our first data center in Johor. We're also building in Kuala Lumpur, and I expect that we will make further investment in Malaysia in the coming months. We're also in Indonesia, where we've got a site in central Jakarta, which will go live at the end of next year. And then in Tokyo, we have our 15th retail data center, which is going to go live in Q3 of next year. We also have SL4, which is our retail data center in Seoul. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is because essentially Equinix is the best manifestation of the digital edge, not just in Asia Pacific, but globally. And as we strive to essentially expand our platform to help both our partners, our customers, because ultimately customers are at the heart of everything we do. And so I might just pause there and hand back to Winston to help us moderate the session.
Thank you, Cyrus. I'm sure we have lots of questions on those expansion plans and what are the trends that's driving those decisions. Again, to everyone online, please do be part of this discussion and do send in your comments, your remarks, or even your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom. Now let's ease into the discussion with a gentle market outlook. Maybe I can ask Andrew his views on what are the trends do you see that your company is looking to maximize in the coming year?
Yeah, sure. I have the joy and congratulations, Cyrus, on the expansion. It's amazing to see, and from a BT perspective, it's great because we're a huge user of your platform. So seeing the expansion here in regions, is music to my ears and feeds into some of the great things that we might talk about later. So great news there. I have the joy of being at Cisco Live this week down here in a very, very sunny Melbourne, which has been fantastic. So it's been great to get back out, seeing customers and seeing service providers. And incidentally, the BT booth is sandwiched right between the Tech Mahindra booth and the Equinix booth. So talking about cross-platform collaboration, you can't get any better than that. And it's great to see the booths so busy. The topics that are on pretty much most people's minds that I'm seeing down here, it's pretty simple. It's the 3 S's. It's security, simplicity, and scalability. And to your point there, if you're not having an AI level conversation or representing AI, you're really kind of somewhat irrelevant. And I guess we'll talk a bit more about AI and the power of that in some further bits of it. But I'll just touch into kind of the 2 key topics there out of those 3. And it's security, I would say, is probably at the forefront of nearly every opportunity that we see from a service provider perspective, as opposed to being what would have been the case maybe a few years ago, certainly being as a nice to have or being bolted onto solutions in years past. So having a security-led conversation or narrative around the solutions and what we're seeing as opportunities is certainly very, very important. And I think part of that leads into the next point of that is just the complexity of managing that. I think is somewhat becoming somewhat unsustainable. That leads into the second topic of simplicity, simply bolting on more and more dashboards and point solutions for customers in these complex solutions. It just really isn't working from a holistic perspective. Even if you've got a great SIEM technology and SOAR technology and all the greatness that sits around that and the benefits that brings, it's just not really a long-term sustainable position for customers. So there's going to be a huge focus, I think, this year on making that much more simpler, making it more tangible for our customers in their security landscape, being able to deal with that in what is effectively an ever-increasing arms race. So and I say the challenges to that we all need to overcome is just from vendors and certainly from a service provider perspective, I'm sure some of my other esteemed panel people will say the same. It's the skills and complexity of delivering that are just 2 of the really big factors in making that very, very difficult.
Thanks. Andrew, you mentioned skills and complexity, but looking at skills, just quickly diving into that, where are you finding the skills? Because everybody is having a short.
I'll be honest, it's the difficult challenge, and I'm sure everyone else will share the same thing. There's a difficult challenge in pipeline of new skills coming into technology. We've been having panel sessions here about diversity and bringing more women into technology, which I don't think we've been, as an industry, as successful as we want to. And there's been some great panels, and I do encourage you to read some of those on Cisco Live that have been posted. So pipeline of new people coming into technology is difficult, and then keeping people with aging skills relevant and getting them skilled up to date on the new technologies that are becoming available. Automation, AI ops, CI/CD, all these great new technologies that are coming out, which our customers are demanding as core givens now, is a very difficult thing to do. I'd love to say we've got the perfect answer for it. I'd be lying through my teeth if we said we had it nailed. But it is a challenge that I think all of us are suffering with, and it's going to be a challenge that goes into the years ahead. But if we don't fix it, we're going to be in trouble for sure as a collective.
Thanks. USR, I'm just wondering from Tech Mahindra's point of view, do you see the similar trends, or do you see some unique trends coming from India?
If you look at with Tech Mahindra being a system integrator, we end up working with many operators across the continent. From what we see, providing services to these operators, the major trends, if you look at where operators are putting their dollars, for example, right, is, as you know, right, 5G is all over the place. There are countries where 5G is live, but Asia Pacific, right, India started off rolling out 5G, and then Malaysia, probably Indonesia, are very close to starting 5G services rollout. So obviously, the spend is on 5G, and what goes without, why you see all the buzz in the news that about 5G investments and how big potential it carries. But operators also have to heavily invest in the fiber infrastructure to be able to provide 5G services, right? There is no 5G if you don't have connectivity to the millimeter wave radios, for example, right? So, and now having said that, while there are technology adoption is the focus of every operator that we work with, but given the market conditions today, right, telecom vertical as such is conservative with respect to the investments they are putting on the table. So I think for going forward, the coming years, what we believe, what again, based on our understanding, is that operators, service providers would optimize or reduce their OpEx. Like, for example, Andrew was saying, that automation is the key. How do you reduce your OpEx so that some of the savings can be fueled back into the R&D budgets that are required for the new technology budgets. Now, if you look at, again, if you double click on what OpEx savings means, one, obviously, you do hyper automation, reduce the number of support personnel required, make the network autonomous, for example, is one. Two, the biggest problem, if you look at any service provider as we speak, is trying to manage the CapEx budgets. And what comes to what is there available for them to be able to overcome is how do we translate this CapEx into an OpEx, right? That's where we are seeing a lot of, all the tier one operators, as you know, are now adopted cloud-based telco clouds, going to hyperscalers or private data centers, so that they go away, instead of investing in huge CapEx-based on-prem servers, moving towards cloud-based infrastructure, hence easing out their CapEx investments. Those two are primary things that we see, but both of them, obviously, will have to go with some kind of analytic that is required for you to be able to maximize your investment with respect to where do you put your base stations, where is your capacity demand going to come from, and how do you upsell or improve the customer experience. I think these are the primary trends which we see will follow what we have seen. And while there is a lot of buzz on Gen AI, requires a lot of compute, for example, but then, say, if you look at the telco point of view, the one which we are seeing taking off is the conversational AI being used for customer care. but I think we are still not there. I think next 2 years, probably there will not be any use case in which the entire network operations can be controlled through generative AI. That's what we believe is happening, and then that's where our focus will be next year or two. I guess that's where we are.
Thanks, USR. I think that's fascinating. Andrew, I just wanted to also highlight a point that USR raised in terms of CapEx, OpEx, and the pressures that service providers face. Do you see the same thing as well on your end, and how you are actually working with?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question. I think where everything is everything's moving towards an as a service type model. Okay, so it's effectively at some point someone needs to be the bank to do that. We're in a global situation where money is tight. Okay, so it's not really particularly in the service provider's best interest sometimes to be bankrolling as much as that as what maybe customers would want to do. So we have to be quite selective in terms of the the agreements and arrangements we get into with some of our key customers. Obviously, we want to be able to provide as a service, flexible commercial engineering on those solutions and give that agility and flexibility which customers demand nowadays. Finding the right balance of making that happen becomes difficult, because the more we do that for our customers to make it easier for them in their agile ways, that takes the money out of one pocket where we would look to then invest that into rapid product development and the features and functions that we want to be able to provide faster. So it's a bit of a difficult seesaw to balance in that sense. And again, that leads us as being to be more selective in some of the customers that we offer that to. Obviously, from a BT perspective, we're more from a more BT business perspective. We're certainly aligned to the major top 800,000 Fortune MNC companies at a global perspective. I would love to be able to offer that kind of feature and functionality to all those customers, but obviously our pockets are only as deep as so. So we need to be a little bit selective in how we actually go about doing that.
Okay. Nitin, bringing you into the discussion, could you lend us your analyst view on what's going on in the service provider?
Sure. So I think USR, Andrew, and Cyrus talked about various aspects of transformation, and possibly also they alluded to some of the challenges that they see in terms of maybe 5G adoption, or I think Andrew talked about the difficult seesaw balance in terms of how he sees digital transformation going, right? So from my perspective, as I look at the industry, I think the telecom industry as well as their customers, the businesses, are getting disrupted by digital transformation, right? So digital transformation in our view is not choice that companies have. It is almost like a survival factor, right? So if you don't digitally transform yourself, somebody else will come and create a new business model and disrupt you and disrupt your business. And in fact, there was one survey of CEOs where almost 30% of the CEOs mentioned that if they don't do digital transformation now, then in next 10 years, their business may not survive, right? So that is, to that extent, I think now digital transformation is almost lifeblood of any business, including, of course, telecom service providers. So yeah, okay. I mean, that's my comment about digital transformation. And I think in terms of some of the enablers, again, Andrew talked about security and also cloud. USR talked about cloud and AI. So I think all of those are cloud, AI, even 5G, IoT. All of these are enablers of this digital transformation. And we, of course, we believe that, of course, some of them are less successful today as maybe some people may want. But essentially, those fundamental principles will continue to be more relevant as the industries transform and companies transform. Obviously, I think AI has come to kind of a center stage. It was always in the background for many years now, but with the so-called advent of ChatGPT, if I can use that word, I think it has captured the imagination of C-level people, and with that, now I think all those so-called the C-level people, CXOs in a way, they are now asking their own IT departments, data officers, hey, how can I use AI in my own company to maybe increase revenue or reduce costs and so on and so forth, right? And I think in the context of telco, I think USR was bang on when he said one of the early use cases that we see is in terms of conversational AI. In fact, just last week I was in Philippines talking to some of the CIOs in a similar roundtable, and one of the use cases from a telco standpoint that came out was that conversational AI to essentially manage the customer service and essentially effectively reduce the cost to serve the customers, right? That's one of the key things that we see as the telco operators are facing revenue pressures because of market saturation and pressures on ARPU. I think that cost to serve will be a very important factor. And I mean, the AI, that was just an example, but many other technologies will come into play.
Thanks, Nitin. I just wanted to ask. You mentioned the fundamentals are still remains the same, but it's a very accelerated market when economics plays a bigger role. I'm just wondering, as a side questions with AI. I mean, at the moment we are at the dawn of AI, but does it have the power to change the fundamentals? Because once AI is part and parcel of a company, we are now even looking at workforces where people are looking, how do you balance what you call human versus non-human agents, and how does that play into the HR playbook itself? So I'm just wondering, does that change the fundamentals? Is that something that service providers need to be looking at in the future or keep an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, I think some people may object to say that AI has just it's done. Yeah, in terms of its acceleration, I think it has reached an inflection point, right? But I think AI has been around for quite some time and being used in many different use cases. Just that now it has reached an inflection point where now mass customers are now evaluating how they can use AI. And as I said earlier, earlier it was more like a lab project for kind of limited to certain esoteric conversations. Now with ChatGPT, it has become more commonplace conversation, and hence it has got that attention. So coming to your point in terms of whether AI changes fundamentals, the answer is yes and no, and depends on what you mean by fundamentals, right? The way we look at AI is essentially digital transformation is about changing the business processes and using technology to change the business processes, right? Now, most of the time when we talk about those changes, it is in terms of some kind of automation, right? But many times the decision is taken by the human in those automations. So there is not much of decision in that automation. Yeah. Now with AI coming in, those business processes, wherever there is a decision involved, that decision also could be either automated or in a way simplified by providing choices to the human agent. And these are based on my analysis. AI would present that hey, these are the 2-3 options that you have, and this is what I recommend. Do you agree? And then of course human agent will take the decision. So in terms of the business process change, yes, now the decisions will be part of that business process change with AI. So that's where some change will happen, but obviously ultimately it will still be change of business processes, and AI will be one component of that. Obviously there will be many other components as well.
Thanks. Maybe answer what Nitin was saying there, which was very good points, by the way. I think we're at a dawn still of AI. As Nitin was saying, we've been using AI in shapes and forms over the last few years. We started obviously predictive AI over the last few years in terms of our service offerings, not just BT, by the way, but for many organizations. I've been using that for smart AI operations, but the key fundamentals have been about taking out efforts, right? And that generally leads into things such as automation. When we're looking at things like Gen AI, I don't think we've just got to the crux yet of what the killer application is going to be, what applications are going to be. They're going to make this the next great thing that we can just let it out of the stables and go with. There's a lot to consider there, like such as the guardrails, the practical application, the responsibility piece of it as well. I think any organization is definitely going to be getting onto it. I think the lights are there that it's the right thing and it will definitely lead into great things, but it's how we actually apply that to what things within the business. Business process engineering, as Nitin talked about, automation, elevation of skills is a key thing where we can use these tools to elevate our people so that they can move higher up the value stack. Back to that critical skills thing earlier and availability of pipeline, we want our people to elevate and be able to do better things for our customers and drive better outcomes. any of the AI tools that allow that to happen has got to be a good thing, but we just need to understand how we're going to apply them and what they're going to be, how they're going to be used in, in it's certainly a responsibility way.
Great. Cyrus, you mentioned earlier on in your presentation in terms of edge computing, and you're putting out the edges across the region. I'm just looking curious, is edge computing becoming a bigger issue with AI and IoT analytics and companies becoming more data-driven?
Yeah, so what I would say is the concept of the edge is quite nebulous. Nobody can really define it. And I think, and obviously this is a kind of biased view, but Equinix's deployments are the best manifestation of the edge. What we have done over the last 25 years is essentially established a market-leading presence in all of the tier one metros around the world. But we've slowly pushed our platform further and further afield so that our customers and our partners who want to deploy outside of the major interconnection and networking hubs around the world can do so. I think from an AI perspective, much like some of the other presenters have said, ultimately it's probably being overestimated in the short term and underestimated in the long term. And so it's pretty clear that we're at the start of a hype cycle in AI, and some of the valuations for some of the companies that are obviously exposed to AI have just been eye-wateringly high. The way I think we think about it is that ultimately AI will be split into two kind of broad domains. There will be training engines and there will be inference engines. The training engines are likely to require huge amounts of capacity, both in terms of power, space, and density. And they will most likely go to areas where there is an abundance of power, the power is relatively cheap, or in fact, it is 100% renewable. But the inference engines, the ones that are much more latency sensitive than the training engines, will likely deploy again in the major metros. So that'll be places like New York, LA, London, Amsterdam, Singapore, Sydney, etc. Whilst I think there's some chance that some of those engines might be put at the edge, I think it's more likely that they'll be put into the major metros because of the abundance of dark fiber, because of the abundance of connectivity, and quite frankly, that is where a lot of the interconnection takes place.
Thanks, Cyrus. Just wanted to dive slightly into what Cyrus has been talking about and his market expansion plans that he was discussing earlier on. Cyrus, could you give some macro reasons why Equinix is focusing on those countries that you mentioned, especially Malaysia, Indonesia, and India?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing to say is that whenever we think about any major expansion, be it in new metro in a country or a new country altogether, the number one criteria is customer demand. We are, as I said before, our customers are at the center of everything we do. And so we have very deep relationships with 10,000 plus customers across the world. And if they are asking us for a new metro, that is where we will expand our edge to. And so that's the number one criteria. But we also think about other things, especially from a data center perspective, obviously. And so we will think about the availability of land. We will think about the availability of power, and particularly renewable power. And so moving into countries where the existing grid is fed by renewable sources is an important criteria. And if renewable sources aren't there today, what is the country doing actually to green its grid? Or can we, in fact, help by investing in power purchase agreements, investing in PPAs, which we've started to do all around the world? And so that's again, a very important criteria. And then finally, at a macro level, given that we are the world's largest telco-neutral co-location data center, we will think very hard about the telco landscape, the regulatory landscape in relation to telecommunications in these new metros, because what we want, obviously, for the benefit of our customers is choice. We want them to be able to choose from a range of telco partners. And in fact, we want to drive business to those partners by ensuring that all of our customers from around the world also deploy there, giving them the opportunity to make healthy margins and have lots of opportunity in those new metros and in those new data centers as well. And so, in summary, it's essentially customer demand driven, land availability, power availability, and then telco landscape.
Thanks, Cyrus. And seems to be a question that popped out. Just looks like a continuation of what you just mentioned. Thanks, Daniel. One of the question is whether the data centers are ready for the compute and energy requirements to support broad enterprise-grade GenAI adoption. Cyrus, do you have any comments to that before I throw the questions to the other panelists?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So we have two businesses inside of Equinix. One is our retail business, and we also have an xScale business, which is a joint venture that we have with some financing partners around the world. Those xScale data centers are essentially large buildings with an abundance of power, very high density availability, as well as the ability to cool all of the density that comes along with AI applications. And so, yes, I would say absolutely we can handle that today. And in all of our discussions about new data centers in the future, certainly in the region and across the globe, we think hard about making sure that they are able to cope with the higher densities of AI and large language models, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think we will see a lot more liquid cooling, maybe not in the next 18, 24 months, but certainly beyond that, as the densities rise and as customers have racks that have significantly more power going to them. You just can't cool them with air. And so I think you will start to see a lot more liquid cooling demand. And we are building data centers today that will satisfy that demand.
Thanks, Cyrus. Andrew, do you have comments on your side in terms of how you're keeping data centers ready for the Gen AI phase or AI in general?
Not so much in terms of data center. I mean, we try to leverage the experts in the space, and Equinix is a key partner for BT actually in that co-location space. We're a big consumer of the fact that the footprint and fabric that Equinix and other partners as well bring to bear that allow us to be effectively a connector. Our number one mission is to connect for good, which is our statement. It's key to understand where our users are, where they're connecting to, and how long that's going to be for. So our job is to make sure that to provide the transport and connectivity into a lot of Equinix data centers and places to allow the workloads and capacity and things that need to happen in those locations, and further on from that, and the connections that go beyond that to happen. We're making sure that the next generation networks that we build, and obviously there's been a huge flip in sort of architectures and WAN architecture in the last few years, which Cyrus was alluding to, which is why we need so many of these edge locations and connecting locations to connect people in this new state of what we call a cloud-centric architecture. Users are everywhere, applications are everywhere, and they move around pretty damn fast. So we need the flexibility and availability to make that connectivity happen, in a seamless way, whether it be large-scale MPLS, VPNs, and the security that maps around that. So whilst the power of how that works within the data centers isn't really sort of my concern, and I would say is more of an Equinix challenge to sort of fix, we need to be very cognizant of making sure that users can get to those things in a secure and reliable way. And that's probably where most of our focus sort of sits on. I read a report this morning, incidentally, which was, again, I would say validate yourselves, but it was published by, I think, Carnegie Mellon as a paper, and they published that to publish just one, let me get this right, one page of a graphic of an image consumed the same amount of power as one full mobile phone charge. So if we need to look at that, and again, I do validate that yourselves. I can post a link into it later on the chat or via LinkedIn. But I thought that was fascinating, and that if we're looking at just the scale of that ramping up, that puts a huge challenge on the power consumptions and availability that Cyrus has talked about. So we need to make sure we've got the connectivity to the right locations to be able to renew, and that sustainable power. And that then fits into the sustainability conversation, which we talked about at the first part, that, there's AI on one side, which is generating these huge, requirements on power. But on the same side of that, we've now got the agenda of sustainability. So balancing those two things is going to be a really key challenge. So again, we need to be using that AI in a responsible way to stay in touch with our sustainability manifestos that everyone's driving to. And I think that's going to be a huge challenge.
Thanks. There's another questions down here, and it's actually alluding to a topic that I was looking to examine, which is going to be about data sovereignty, data laws, and regulations. Maybe I'd like to ask Nitin to comment on how end customers are actually addressing data sovereignty laws, especially the data regulations and new data regulations that seem to be coming on quite fast. And what are the expectations on service providers?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, when there is a regulation, the only strategy is to comply, right? So there is no other choice. So yeah, I think there are, of course, different ways in which you can comply. And as you said, there are different types of data regulation. One is the data sovereignty, where you have to have local residency of the data. And of course, there are regulations about PII, or like the PDPA laws, right? Essentially, where you look at the privacy of the data of private information. So I think there are different ways in which service providers can play a role. Obviously, one of the ways in which I think I'm sure BT and Equinix they are addressing is by providing that residency. That is probably one of the reasons as well that, say, Equinix is opening so many branches. Branches is a wrong word, data centers in those locations. So that is one, and also so that gives that residency aspect. Beyond that, I would also say that there are technologies which may be value-added services that the service providers can use, provide in terms of potentially encryption of data or data loss prevention solutions, maybe. And in the context, I think in many ways, as you know, many security breaches or data loss happens because of identity, right? And many of the service providers have identity is one of their strength, right? So potentially they can use that to their advantage as well, as they help their customers navigate the security challenges and the data challenges.
Thanks, Nitin. From USR's point of view, Tech Mahindra's point of view, your thoughts on data sovereignty and data laws and regulations? What are the challenges you face when actually end customers are asking for help?
Yeah. So you see, if you look at when we work with service providers, we invariably work with them to be able to take the move their connectivity services into enterprises, right? Which is entire 5G and all the bandwidth and low latency that we are creating. The business case is all about the next frontier is the enterprise use cases, not consumer. Because there is no killer application for consumers to pay for 1 gig speed, for example, right? So having said that, see, when we work with these enterprises, you take me about 90% of the enterprises have a concern on data leaving their premise. It could be the regulations, privacy regulations, or more importantly, it will be the business criticality. They just don't want the business information to be residing outside their campus. That's how the transformation of the OT teams on the floor. For them, if something is working for the last 20 years, why change now, right? To mindset to taking them to digital transformation, which I think, we heard that there is no more a option, but to go for digital transformation. So what I think I agree with what Cyrus was saying, right, is that while the models can be trained, it doesn't matter, but the edge inference, the enforcement is happening at edge for 2 reasons, right? One, to comply with the regulations. 2, it's just not economical for you to backhaul the entire data into the central place, and the latencies do not permit a lot of use cases. So we are seeing the similar trend with other panelists that at edge, AI algorithms get enforced, but they can be trained anywhere, and then they push into the edge locations to be able to realize some of the use cases. For example, drone, right? You can't have a real-time control of a drone based on the inspection of a cell tower sitting at a central cloud, creating a lot of latency on what you want to operate on. So that's kind of use cases that we also are seeing.
Okay. Andrew, do you have any comments on that? And how do you see Equinix the expansion strategy playing to that strength in terms of helping you to work with end customers to address some of these issues?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I'm super happy to see the expansion of Equinix and what they're doing with the footprints, just from a consumer perspective and a provider perspective as well, which is two opposing views sometimes. BT is going through a huge rollout of our next generation network, which is Global Fabric, which we've just been launching over the last few weeks. And a key component of making that successful is Equinix. So we're in sandwiched between two parts of an arms race where the hyperscalers are rolling out their cloud data centers as quickly as possible. A lot of those are using Equinix technology as well, Equinix hosting facilities to do that. Where our mission is to make sure that we, as a communications provider, are where the hyperscalers are, where Equinix is, and where users want to connect to. Bridging that gap is a key thing for us. The quicker we can do that, at the same scale that Equinix are going forwards, and at the same scale that the cloud providers are going forwards, is great for us, because that means that we can offer that functionality and agility to our customers that also are expecting that agility to be par for the course these days. Part of our mission there is that historically speaking, going back a few years, a customer wanting to connect securely to the internet via a co-location facility to a hyperscaler would take weeks, if not months, to turn all that up via a lot of steps and a lot of cost. Our agenda has been to make that very agile, very quick, very self-service, so that we can pass that, not just because that's a great BT feature or another service provider feature, that we can actually offer that functionality to our end customers and give them that flexibility to have that connectivity as well. So that's always going to be a good thing. And it's key that we've got the great partners to help us facilitate that, because we can't do that at a global scale in some somewhat difficult to do regions of business, across the footprint. What works in Texas doesn't quite work sometimes in Melbourne, and having that partner framework that allows that to happen is certainly keys to our success and making that work for our customers as well.
And if I can just add on there, Andrew, so that's actually a really important point. When we think about expanding in our metros, we think about making sure that we're doing so in a really consistent fashion, so that we bring the power of the Equinix platform across the globe very consistently. So if you walk into a data center in Mumbai, in Los Angeles, New York, or London, you get the same experience. Your phone connects to Wi-Fi immediately. All of the SLAs are very, very similar. And so being able to provide that consistency, I think, not only helps obviously our partners, but also helps our customers as well, because they know when they choose an Equinix, and I think now over 90% of our customers are in more than one data center. More than 2/3 of our customers are deployed in 2 regions around the world. They're looking for that consistency of experience wherever they go with us.
Thanks, Cyrus. I think that's a really good point. But I just wanted to quickly come out with one point, which seems to be a secondary theme, but it's something that connects some of these questions from the audience, is cyber resilience and cyber security, I think, which is something that Cyrus also mentioned. Cyrus, I just wanted to ask, how important is cyber resilience? How is that shaping your plans? I mean, talk about 2-3 years ago, people talk about cyber resilience as really a security teams issue, but now it is a business issue. It's actually a boardroom issue, and regulators are getting in much more. They're getting in deep into cyber resilience. They are actually pushing a lot of the companies to follow it. How do you see that as an opportunity? What are the challenges that you see from your perspective, and how are you addressing them?
Yeah, so look, I think some of the other panelists might be able to address this a little bit better than us, because ultimately what Equinix is providing is space, power, and interconnection as a service, essentially. One of the things we do, however, is that we work with our partners certainly to ensure that they're getting access to our customers who are thinking about cyber resilience. And so we work with a range of MSPs, including BT, obviously, to make sure that as our customers think about their transformation on the digitization journey, that they're making sure that cyber resilience is kind of at the core of that. But I might hand to Andrew, who might be able to add some points here.
Andrew?
I'll try. Again, it's if you look at the elevation of that stack that Cyrus talked about, there's the power, cooling environment perspective, which is what Equinix is famous for, and other things as well. But we look at it from a connectivity perspective. That customers will look to BT for security of the connection, security of the transport, security of the communication. Okay, and many customers treat that it is secure, that we've got the right technologies in place, transparently or intransparently, that allows that to sort of happen. So again, a great example would be DDoS. All of our future networks that we're rolling out have embedded DDoS protection built in as a de facto standard. So where we're connecting to internet or having internet connectivity or bring your own connectivity into some of our communication fabrics, being able to do that securely is a key component of that. Again, obviously, we can then provide managed services on top of that to do elevated security enablement and security management, whether it be cyber or firewalls or security or intrusion. All the great systems and tools that we can apply to that are also quite key as well. And that's becoming almost an expectation. It's the minimum level that customers want. And we need to be able to offer that quite quickly to our customers so that they can consume that. Again, back to my point at the very start, it can't be that we deliver these environments and then put security on top. It's the first thing that customers are looking for now, given the world that we live in with ransomware and all the difficulties that come with that. So I think that pyramid is inverted. It's the first conversation now, and an expected outcome rather than a desirable outcome further down the line.
Thanks. USR, just quick question from your side. Does this pressure on making sure it can address some of the data regulations and also security and cyber resilience, how does this change your relationship with end customers and companies like Equinix?
See, there are two things I think I just wanted to highlight this instant, right? What we know today as per better regulations, right? What we know is what we know today. What we don't know is, yes, every country, if you look at, right, Winston, every country is trying to put their own legislations on what is allowed in AI, what is not allowed. While AI can change the entire world, how much it will be allowed to do is a function of how each country will decide on what is allowed in their culture and the transformation that they want to do. That's a $1 million question, right? So the pace at which we'll adopt is a function of what we'll be allowed to do. But as far as the security is concerned, right? So what we are seeing is that the moment you go and then move your on-prem applications into the private or public cloud, and what we know, right? If you literally look at all the public cloud providers are the ones who are most affected. They have an attack trying every minute. They actually are putting their security infrastructure to be in place for the applications to be up and running. So the moment you migrate your applications to a central place, you become more risk. You're taking risk. So what we do as part of system integration services, what we operators and the enterprise customers expect us is to be able to provide what we call it the managed security services, right? Where they entrust companies like us to be able to provide them end-to-end security for the infrastructure and at the application level, right? I think there's a reference to the asymmetric security, right? You cannot have a strong firewall and think that my connectivity is secure, but in a way, a vulnerability in the OS, people can re-engineer, reverse engineer to be able to come and then bypass some of the rules in your firewall itself, right? So that is where companies like us are trying to work with those operators and enterprise customers to be able to give a managed security service that covers infrastructure, the applications together as a whole. That's where we are.
Thanks. Nitin, your thoughts so far as in terms of cyber resilience, what has been discussed?
Yeah, so agree. I think now security is a C-level, CXO level conversation, especially when it comes to data. And I think in the context of businesses, right? So security is a problem that they have to solve, right? So whether they decide to solve it on their own and make all the relevant investments to solve on their own, that's their decision. But many times what we find is that it's a complex problem, and generally many of them would choose to have a partner. Now that partner can be providing managed security services, as I think USR mentioned, or could be providing, say, anti-DDoS solution through their network, as I think Andrew mentioned, or they can also potentially work with some of the cloud service providers where they have, or cloud services from the service providers, where there is a shared responsibility of protecting the data, right? So essentially, there are, depending on the comfort level of that of the end user businesses, they can choose a relevant partner who can be a service provider, can be cloud service, can be network service, can be managed security service provider, and then based on that, kind of manage the entire security framework for their company.
Thanks, Nitin. I feel that we have just started the discussion because it seems like the questions are getting to be much more specific, but we are coming to near the end of our discussion. It just seems to be getting to be better and better as we go on. So maybe you'd like to end on a high note. We are talking about service provider space. We are looking at a new year, which is going to be comes with its own set of challenges and its own set of opportunities. So maybe I would like to ask at this time, Andrew, set a tone in terms of what do you see in terms of insights and key takeaways that service providers need to keep in mind as they move to the new year?
Wow, big question. I guess, certainly from a BT perspective, we're really excited. Obviously, we've just relaunched our Global Fabric platform a few weeks ago, and it's going to be a go crazy for us over the next 12 months to just get that enabled and rolled out across the globe. Actually, partnering again with Equinix and a lot of the partners here as well, because we won't be successful in doing that without a very strong partner relationship. That's quite key. So again, that's probably another part of that, where working doubly hard with our partners over the next year is going to be a key thing, and that's also a great thing to do. Building those relationships and developing that, and then enabling that for our customers is going to be probably the key year for us. Certainly off the back of a few difficult years for, I think, everybody on the call with the pandemic and the downturn and the geopolitical situation as well. So we're going into this quite happy and very excited, I guess, with the opportunity that's ahead. And I think that's going to hopefully manifest itself into some great deals for people, some great opportunities, and ultimately some great outcomes for all our customers, which is the important part of this. So yeah, exciting year ahead, I think, for us.
USR, what about your thoughts?
Yeah, I think see, the way that we look from service provider point of view, I think they would be focusing on delivering services from the edge, develop infrastructure, leverage Equinix kind of partners to be able to reach far-flung areas. Two, I think the one point which we have not touched, I think the largest spend that any service provider would have is the energy. So the entire, if you look at the one main ask from our service providers is, how do I save or cut down my energy bills? Three, which is while I do my best, but what is my energy supplier is trying to do towards sustainability. So that is where I think probably service providers would definitely look at somebody like Equinix, which has committed to having a complete 100% reusable energy by 2030. Because that is one of the CS. Without that, there is no, all the corporates are made accountable for their sustenance targets, and that is again is a focus they would have. I think, which that's what I feel.
Thank you, Nitin. What about yourself? Do you see sustainability becoming a huge issue in the next year, or?
I think it is anyway a big issue, but I think if I may, right, I want to talk about the future from a service provider standpoint, where I think service providers are in a good position through their the traditional businesses as well as the new businesses like cloud, or say managed security, managed services, or other services that they may provide. I think they are in a good position to become one of the enablers for their customers, especially business customers, to change their to change their business models and enable them to change business models, just the way cloud provider, the hyperscalers have done. I think the local service providers have that opportunity to do at a local level for their customers in the region. I think that is how I would like to see them evolve their businesses in future.
Global local, that's one of the terms. Cyrus, what about yourself? Last thoughts?
So look, I would say, I think I would summarize the next year as one of opportunity. As I outlined in the early part of this webinar, we're expanding pretty aggressively into a lot of new metros where the Equinix platform doesn't exist today. That is going to create an enormous amount of opportunity for all of our service providers, all of our network providers, and all of our customers. We have tried very hard, and I think we've been successful in finding great pieces of land, building really high quality, in fact, world-leading data centers that are going to be highly interconnected. And we're going to build those ecosystems in those new metros, just as we have done all around the world. That, in my mind, is a great source of opportunity for all of our partners. And so, in my mind, the next year and the year after, as we continue to expand in Southeast Asia and India, we will be hopefully providing opportunity for everybody who is part of the broader Equinix ecosystem.
Thank you, Cyrus. Looks like we've come to the end of this discussion. So a big thank you to all our panelists for their insights. I'm sure many of you have some questions. And as I said, we have taken note of your questions and we'll be sending it to the panelists. But again, please do feel free to connect with yourself with the Equinix representatives or ourselves if you have further questions as well. So for now, on behalf of our sponsor, Equinix, our guests from twimbit, PT, and Tech Mahindra, and us from CDOTrends, have a great week and weekend, and look forward to seeing you in person or virtually in the next event in the new year.